The champagne in the boardroom wasn't just cold, it was triumphant. The air smelled of expensive cologne and vindication. Wirecard AG, a company born in the obscure corners of the internet, had just ascended to the throne of the DAX 30 index. They had kicked out Commerzbank, an institution that had stood for 148 years, to take its place among the industrial titans of Germany. It was a symbolic execution. The old world of steel, chemicals, and heavy vaults was dying. The new world of code, data, and invisible money had arrived. Markus Braun, the company's CEO, stood at the front of the room in his signature black turtleneck, a deliberate costume designed to evoke the genius of Steve Jobs. He told the world that Wirecard was the future of finance. He told them that profits were doubling, that the reach was global, and that the technology was so advanced, only a few could truly understand it. But the most effective magic trick is not what you show the audience. It is what you let them imagine. Now, let us open the archives and dissect the anatomy of this failure. We need to understand how a company worth nearly 24 billion euros, a sum that could buy entire navies or bail out small nations, evaporated into thin air. We need to look past the suit and the turtleneck to see the shadow behind the success. To understand the lie, you first have to understand the business, or at least the business they claim to be in. At its core, Wirecard was a payment processor. This sounds dry, but think of it as the plumbing of the global economy. When you buy a coffee with a credit card or purchase a flight online, your money doesn't teleport. It travels through a series of digital pipes, moving from your bank through a security checkpoint to the merchant's bank. Wirecard owned the pipes. They were the digital toll booth operators. Every time money moved, they lifted the gate and took a tiny sliver of a cent. It is a beautiful business model. It is invisible, it is necessary, and if you have enough volume, it prints money while you sleep. For years, Wirecard claimed they were processing payments for everyone from respectable airlines to major supermarkets. But their origins were murkier. They started in the gray zones of the internet, gambling and pornography. These are high-risk industries where traditional banks fear to tread. Wirecard stepped in, charging higher fees for handling the dirty money. As they grew, they needed to look cleaner. They needed to look like a tech giant. And they did. The stock price climbed a vertical wall. Investors, desperate for a German version of Silicon Valley, didn't just buy the stock. They fell in love with it. They saw Wirecard as a national champion, a shield against the dominance of American tech giants. But there was a problem. A small group of outsiders, short sellers, and investigative journalists from the Financial Times started noticing cracks in the stained glass. They looked at the numbers, and the physics didn't make sense. Wirecard's profit margins were unnaturally high. While competitors struggled for every fraction of a percentage point, Wirecard seemed to defy gravity. When critics asked how, the company responded with a wall of technobabble. They used phrases like real-time data analysis, AI-driven risk management, and complex merchant acquisition structures. These weren't explanations. They were sedatives. They were complex words designed to make auditors feel stupid and investors feel safe. It's the classic defense of the charlatan. You don't understand the math, because you aren't a genius like me. The critics weren't deterred. They started asking for the physical proof of the money. Where were the cash reserves? Where were the customers? Wirecard's answer was always the same. The money is there. It's just not here. It's in Asia. It's moving through subsidiaries. It's complicated. They were pointing to a locked box and telling the world it was full of gold. And for a very long time, the world was too afraid to ask for the key, terrified that if they opened the box, they might find it empty. But the skeptics kept digging. They realized that the silicon miracle was operating like a speedometer that read 200 miles per hour, while the car was sitting on cinder blocks in the garage. The engine was roaring, the gas was burning, but the wheels weren't touching the ground. How do you fake €1 billion? You can't just print counterfeit banknotes. That's crude and easily detected. You can't just edit your own bank statement. The auditors check directly with the bank. To steal at this scale, or rather, to invent at this scale, you need to exploit the blind spots of the system. You need to create a layer of fog so thick that even the smartest accountants lose their way. Wirecard's fog machine had a name: third-party acquirers, TPAs. This is the mechanism. This is the smoking gun. And to understand it, we must strip away the financial jargon. Imagine you are a baker in Munich. You want to sell pretzels in Singapore, but you don't have a license to operate a business there. So, you make a deal with a local guy named Steve. You tell Steve, you sell my pretzels under your name, collect the cash, keep a small fee, and hold the rest of the money for me until I ask for it. In the financial world, Steve is a third-party acquirer. It is a legitimate practice. It happens all the time when companies expand into new, difficult markets. But for Wirecard, these weren't just partners. They were ghosts. Wirecard claimed that because they didn't have their own licenses in certain parts of Asia, they relied on these partners to process payments for them. On paper, it looked spectacular. These partners with impressive names like Al Alam Solutions or Senjo Group were apparently processing billions of euros in transactions for airlines and travel agencies. But when investigative journalists traveled to the physical addresses of these mighty financial partners, they didn't find skyscrapers or bustling data centers. They found a bus tour operator's office in the Philippines. They found a retired seaman's modest house in a residential neighborhood. They found an empty office in Dubai with plastic plants, and a receptionist who had no idea what payment processing meant. This was the Potemkin village strategy. Behind the facade of a global empire, there was nothing but cardboard props. Here is how the machine worked, broken down into 4 simple steps. Step 1. The fabrication. Wirecard invented fake customers doing fake business. Step 2. The routing. They claimed these customers were paying through the third-party acquirers, our friends, the Steves. Step 3. The ledger. Wirecard recorded this fake revenue on their own books back in Germany. And finally, the alibi. When auditors asked, "Where is the cash?" Wirecard simply said, "Oh, it's sitting in a trustee account in Asia. It's safe. It's just parked there." It was a closed loop of hallucination. The money never moved because the money never existed. For years, the auditors at EY, Ernst & Young, accepted this. They looked at screenshots and documents provided by Wirecard. They trusted the stamp. They trusted the suit. They didn't walk down the street to check if the shop actually existed. This is the confirmation bias of finance. If the fees are paid and the coffee is good, you assume the numbers are real. But by 2019, the pressure was mounting. The Financial Times was screaming fraud. The short sellers, the scavengers of the market were circling, betting millions that the company was a lie. Wirecard needed to prove the money was real. They hired KPMG for a special audit, hoping to clear their name. Instead, it backfired. KPMG came back and effectively said, "We cannot verify that these profits exist." The stock began to wobble. The board was in panic mode. They needed a miracle. They needed to show the world the 1.9 billion euros that were supposedly sitting in two banks in the Philippines. BPI, Bank of the Philippine Islands, and BDO Unibank. This sum, 1.9 billion euros, was roughly a quarter of the company's entire balance sheet. It was the lifeblood. Without it, Wirecard was insolvent. The deadline for the annual financial report was approaching. If Wirecard couldn't produce a signed confirmation from the banks in the Philippines proving the money was there, the game was over. Wirecard's COO, Jan Marsalek, a man who operated more like a spy master than a corporate executive, scrambled. He produced documents. He produced letters signed by bank employees. But this time, the auditors did something they should have done years ago. They called the banks in the Philippines directly. The response was immediate and devastating. "We have no relationship with Wirecard." The documents were forgeries, and not even good ones. They were clumsy fakes, likely put together in a rush. The employee signatures were spurious. The account numbers didn't match the bank's formatting. It was like handing a bartender a driver's license drawn in crayon. The 1.9 billion euros wasn't missing. You can only lose something that you had in the first place. This money was a fiction. It was a line of code entered into a spreadsheet to balance an equation that never added up. The illusion shattered instantly. On the 18th of June 2020, Wirecard announced that the auditors refused to sign the accounts. The stock plummeted, losing 60% of its value in minutes, then 80%, then 99%. Billions of euros of real wealth pension funds, savings accounts, retail investments evaporated. Markus Braun, the visionary in the black turtleneck, was arrested. He looked smaller without his podium, confused, insisting he too was a victim of a fraud. But Jan Marsalek, the architect of the mechanism, he didn't wait for the handcuffs. He boarded a private jet to Belarus, then on to Russia, vanishing into the geopolitical shadows, taking the secrets of the machine with him. The Silicon Miracle was revealed to be nothing more than a digital Ponzi scheme, fueled by phantom wallets and sustained by the willful blindness of those who were paid to watch. When the dust settled, the silence in the Wirecard headquarters was heavy. This wasn't just a bankruptcy. It was a crater where a corporation used to be. The 1.9 billion euros, the missing keystone, was never found. Not because it was hidden too well, but because it was never there. It was a ghost. A number typed into a spreadsheet to balance an equation that was fundamentally broken. The collapse of Wirecard forced a painful question, not just for the bankers, but for an entire nation. How did this happen in Germany? This is the land of precision, of strict rules, of Ordnung. How did a gang of techno-futurists run a multi-billion-euro Ponzi scheme right under the nose of the most rigid regulators in Europe? The answer lies in a fatal flaw of human psychology. We do not check the credentials of the things we desperately want to love. Germany was starving for a tech success story. They looked at Silicon Valley with envy. They wanted an Apple, a Google, a PayPal. They wanted to prove that the old industrial heartland could still compete in the digital age. Wirecard was the answer to that prayer. It was the German PayPal. Because of this national hunger, the immune system of the market failed. When the Financial Times published their reports exposing the fraud, the German financial regulator BaFin didn't investigate Wirecard. They investigated the journalists. They filed criminal complaints against the reporters for market manipulation. They even banned short selling on Wirecard stock. Think about that. The referee didn't just ignore the foul. He tackled the player who pointed it out. They built a fortress around the lie to protect it from the truth. This is the most dangerous mechanism of all: institutional confirmation bias. The banks, the auditors, the regulators, and the investors all held hands and jumped off the cliff together, because letting go would mean admitting they had been fooled. The cost of this delusion was catastrophic. It wasn't just hedge funds that lost money. It was retail investors, regular people, who put their retirement savings into a safe DAX 30 company. It was the thousands of employees who believed they were building the future, only to find themselves scrubbing a crime scene. Jan Marsalek remains a fugitive, likely living under a new name in the shadow of the Kremlin, a living testament to the fact that with enough money and enough secrets, you can exit the stage before the curtain falls. Markus Braun sits in a cell, still claiming he was the victim, a CEO who knew nothing of his own company's engine room. But the legacy of Wirecard is not about accounting standards or third-party acquirers. It is a monument to the power of the narrative. It proved that if you tell a story big enough, and if that story flatters the ego of the listener, you don't need profits. You don't need customers. You don't even need money.
Quite.
Until, of course, the lights turn on. The story of Wirecard is a modern tragedy, but it follows an ancient script. It is the story of the alchemist, promising to turn lead into gold. In the 21st century, we don't use cauldrons. We use algorithms. We don't use spells. We use EBITDA adjustments and strategic partnerships. We want the magic to be real. We want the graph to go up forever without the friction of gravity. And because we want it so badly, we close our eyes to the wires and the mirrors. But the economy is not a place of magic. It is a place of physics. You cannot create value out of silence. You cannot build a castle on a foundation of fog. Every time we ignore the skeptics, every time we choose the complex lie over the simple, boring truth, we are signing a contract with a future crisis. Because in the ledger of history, every debt must eventually be paid.